Hey guys, this week we're going to be doing something a little different that we've never actually done, and we're going to be looking at a new tooling of a subject matter we've previously looked at from the same company. That said, we're going to be looking at Tamiya's 1/48 scale Spitfire Mk.1, specifically the new tooling version. Let's open her on up and take a look. We'll get to these extras in a minute. So, starting off Uh, right away from this sprue, we can start to see some of the differences they've made. Mainly, it's not so much them reinventing the wheel as them refining it. All of the details on the surface are just that tiny bit better. Um, Only real areas that seem to be roughly the same are here on the exhaust. They're still your basic plastic exhausts. Uh, Cockpit detail on the instrument panel is roughly the same, albeit maybe just a little crisper. Props basically the same. Really, a lot of the details are similar, but again, just a little bit more refined. Before I forget again, probably the biggest difference, at least on this sprue, is that they've redesigned how the landing gear part connects in, using this sort of U-shape design with a separate part that goes over this to cover it up. I would say it's definitely interesting and different. Offhand, I can't think of any other kits that I've personally looked at that uses this style design. I do think it's a good idea. It allows you to get additional support and more easily shoulder the weight of the weight of the kit. Granted, on a kit this size, that's not that much, and since it's a tail sitter anyway, since it's a tail dragger, it's not as big a deal, but I can see from an engineering standpoint why this would be beneficial. Moving on, we've got our two fuselage halves. Again, a refinement of the previous design. However, probably the biggest change here is we now have these separate sidewall panels for the cockpit. Be honest, I think these are a marked improvement over what was there before. Fortunately, don't have the older kit handy, so we could do a direct comparison. I will drop a link to the previous version's video in the descriptor. Again, I do think they've done a lot to improve on the detailing of these parts compared to the original. Again, as I mentioned, here we have our main gear. I do think this is an interesting and smart way to do it, as it does help to shoulder the weight. Beyond that, though, we've got our landing gear doors and various other odds and end parts on this particular sprue. Overall, nice job there. Moving on to the last of the gray plastic sprue, we have the rest of our cockpit details. Even just out of the box, it's a nicely detailed cockpit, building up all the various different framing components and a slew of extras. We also have our control surfaces, which are done as separate parts, and our wingtips. I do think that they did it smartly to have the wingtips as separate parts, as allows them to potentially in the future do additional versions down the road. Now, one area that really hasn't significantly improved, in my opinion, is the pilot. While it is better than the original, it still has issues. Probably the biggest being this massive open space in his back. How much of that will be visible once you install him in the cockpit, I don't know. I do think that it's not that hard to also sculpt it back, in my opinion. So I would say this is one area, if you're going to do it as a crew or in flight and need a pilot figure, you might go elsewhere. Additionally to this, we also have all of our machine guns as actual parts. Offhand, I don't recall on the original review if they had done that on there. I think that was one of the things I had remarked. We also have several parts that have been redesigned for various areas around the aircraft as well, and a much more complicated build for the seat as well. Moving on to our clear sprue. We've got a couple different option parts, and as well as two different styles of canopy, as well as open and closed configurations, and two different styles of front armor and rear view mirror. Arguably, I think that this is another area where they've definitely done their homework and improved the design from the previous one. We also got a couple different styles of gun sights and a few other odds and ends parts. Clarity on the parts is clear and nice. I also don't see any sort of mold lines on these curved parts. So Tamiya has done a fantastic job here. So, moving on from there, we are also given a couple of nice little extras. If I can grab them. First is a nice set of photo etch. It's not much, but gives you just that little bit of extra to detail it out. We've got seatbelts and a few other little odds and end parts that otherwise would be a bit difficult, including one style of gun sight, as well as a couple parts for attaching the aerials to the antenna mast. So good job for including this. It's one of those nice little things they don't have to do, but it just makes things a lot easier. Similarly with this masking set. Tamiya doesn't always include stuff like this, but when they do, it's one of those things that just makes it that much nicer. We also get a couple little decal parts there. Nothing to really talk about there. Moving on to our decals. Typical Tamiya quality. Everything's nice, sharp, bright, and register. We've got 3 different aircraft, which they've nicely split, as well as our stencils. Only complaint I would have is these tip stencils for the propeller blades. I personally don't think they're worth it. Honestly, I think it's just easier to go ahead and paint those and mask them off. Yeah, it takes a little bit longer, but they look so much nicer than any type of decal. Moving on, we do get this nice little infographic booklet that's included. Not something, again, Tamiya needs to include, but it's just nice to have. Going into instructions, this is a fairly complicated kit to build up, as we have different versions, as well as various parts that need to be modified depending on which version you're building. They do a very nice job of illustrating which one, which parts go to, both from the A, B, and C. I also like that they do give you the little preview display of which one's which. That's, again, another thing they don't have to do, but it just makes things a lot easier to understand and keep track of. So, starting in the cockpit, it's, as with most aircraft kits, we start building it up for moving forward into the engine and remainder of the cockpit. Get a pilot in for buttoning everything up. Again, this is a fairly complicated build up to this point, so do make sure you're paying attention, especially with these different versions. That's arguably going to be the biggest area that if you're going to find a potential problem down the line, it's going to be because you missed one of these little gotchas. From there, we start building up the exterior. adding on our control surfaces, working on the wings, getting the landing gear assemblies put together before buttoning up the wings and mating everything together. Then finishing out the remainder of the detail, landing gear, and then our canopy selection. Again, it's nice that they include the mask and tell you how to use it, as well as which canopies go to which version. For doing the finishing details, mask, propeller, antennas, and all of that, we then move on to our stencil diagram, both top and sides. Now, as for our painting instructions, in typical Tamiya fashion, we get this very nice 1-to-1 scale drawing for one of the versions. This is for the cover art version. You do also get these additional 2 versions for the 2 other aircraft that we have markings included for, our B and C options. Fortunately, they're about 3/4 scale. But you still get all the information you need and get a nice little post to go with at the end. So, what do I think? I think Tamiya has taken their initial Mark 1 design and in basically every way possible refined it and perfected it. I think really it comes down to 2 factors: cost and availability. Obviously, since this is a newer kit, it's going to be a bit more expensive. Probably in today's dollars about twice the price of the original, at least. But obviously, if you can get it for the same price as the original, then obviously it's a no-brainer, go with this one. However, if you're not particular or you're on a budget, the original still is a fantastic kit. So it really comes down to, as I say, how much you're willing to spend and what's actually available to you. Regardless, though, either one will build up great. I would say, out of the box, this one, without a doubt, is the better of the 2. Just because it's got all the finer detailing, newer engineering methods, so it will build up much nicer and in a lot of ways much easier despite the added complexity. But ultimately, that choice is going to be up to you. So that was a look at Tamiya's new 1/48 scale Spitfire Mk.1, a marked improvement over the original, despite the original still holding its own. So, until next time.